Okay, I've been instructed to get started as much on time as I can. So I'll go ahead and do that. Don't feel bad if you're still walking in, no problem. We're going to try to stop at as close to noon as possible. And so if you have questions and we don't get time to address them, you can maybe talk to me at lunch or this afternoon, but also tomorrow, if you're here tomorrow in the Bible class portion between the two services, do kind of an extended Q&A where I'll summarize just some of these ideas and then open it up. So there should be time. If you have questions, write them down so them, and I will make sure that sometime this weekend I will respond to them. How well I respond, no guarantees, but I will at least respond to them at some point this weekend if you write those down. Okay, so we've already talked about the crisis facing youth ministry, the alarming percentage, about half of teens who leave the church after high school. We specifically talked about the problem of age segregation, ways in which our culture and our churches have systematically isolated young people from adults. Last session we talked about, we went to Scripture, and we talked about how the Bible consistently emphasizes that the faith family and the physical family have responsibility for raising children in the faith. When these two groups are working together, the biblical example is followed, and studies show that good things happen in terms of young people developing a mature, long-lasting faith in Jesus Christ. So now we want to get really practical. How do we take these ideas that we've been talking about today and apply them and implement them in the church? How do we re-envision the work that we do in youth ministry to emphasize the importance of the physical and faith families? So we're going to conclude our morning portion today by discussing steps for developing a youth in family ministry model in the local congregation. And I know that here at Great Falls, you all have been talking about a lot of these ideas for a long time, and so probably a lot of what I've said has not been very foreign or challenging to you, and I hope that some of this will be really helpful as you're trying to just seek to take steps to go in this direction. So just real quickly, to repeat some terminology, family ministry usually refers to ministry practices that emphasize the importance of parents and the physical family. Intergenerational ministry, that's usually used to refer to practices that emphasize the entire congregation being together, teaching and learning from one another. And I use physical family and faith family to use those two things, and then refer to them as the twin pillars of this whole model. As you can imagine, and as we'll see, there's a lot of overlap between these two things. And so as we talk about implementing this in a local congregation, we're just going to weave these two things together, and you'll see as I talk about different ideas, faith family and physical family, sometimes both at the same time. So I've got 5 steps here that we're going to talk about as far as practical steps to implement. Number 1, we want to establish youth and family ministry as a core value. So I mentioned this in the last session, but youth and family ministry is not just another program to add to a list of programs that your church has already. Instead, it is a value that should affect all the programs that you've got going on at church. In other words, for it to be effective, it needs to be more than just a fad or a method. It needs to be a core value that the congregation understands and cares deeply about. Making a new idea a core value of your congregation, like it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to do it. It's a lot harder to kind of change the culture, but there are a lot of ways that can help bring that about. And I'm just going to share some of the things that I've done to try to get people thinking along these lines in the 2 congregations I've worked with. And obviously, it varies from church to church depending on just what things are like at your church and the different opportunities you have. At my previous congregation, where I initially did all of this research and decided that I wanted to change our church culture to reflect a youth and family ministry perspective, one of the first things I did was to develop a ministry plan with all of these ideas and to present that to a lot of our key leaders. I shared it with our preaching minister so he could be aware of what we were trying to accomplish. I sat down with all of our elders and talked to them about this. We specifically had one shepherd, one elder who was over our youth ministry, so I talked to him a lot about it to make sure that he really understood what we were trying to do. I shared the plan with our youth deacons so they could understand the direction in which we were moving. I shared these ideas with, we had a ministry leader who was over involvement, which basically that meant he kind of planned a lot of the church activities. So I wanted him to know these are values that we care about. so he could plan future events with that in mind and kind of tweak those things. But basically, it's like you won't be able to implement this as a core value unless your leaders understand it and are on board with it. Now, something I didn't do, which hopefully is very helpful, is to have a seminar with 24 people to kind of share those ideas and get them on board. So hopefully this weekend, if I do a halfway decent job, that'll be a big help in having several of you kind of on board with this thing already. Another thing I did that was really helpful, and I wish that I would have done it a lot sooner at my first congregation, was I preached a sermon on the idea of youth and family ministry on a Sunday morning. It was a lot of the same material that I've presented here. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So, two different churches. So, my first church was about 230, so probably similar to this church, especially pre-COVID. And we had like 5 elders, I think, and I don't remember 12-ish deacons maybe. And so now at Cloverdale, Church in Searcy is a different animal. So pre-COVID, we had like 700 probably, but of those, that's during the school year because we already had 200 to 300 college students. Yeah, wrap your mind around that. Yeah, it's been interesting. We have like 18 elders or 16 elders. There's a lot of elders. And then we have I don't even know how many deacons we have. We have a brochure that lists the deacons and what they do, and I haven't memorized the brochure yet. So a lot, right? And when I say like, at my previous congregation I did this. At this the congregation I'm at now, like I went through this with like a committee that was hiring me. Like I talked through all these ideas, and the elders were aware of what was going on. So a key idea to preach a sermon on these ideas. And so I did that at Farmington. I wish I would have done it earlier. So when I moved to Cloverdale, within the first few months, I preached a sermon on this because I wanted people to know just up front, this is what we're about. I will preach that sermon again. I'll probably preach that sermon over and over again, like every 3 years or so. Because if these are core values, this is what we're trying to do. Like it has to be reminded over and over again. We have to repeat things that are really important if we want people to get them. And actually, I will share a version of that same sermon tomorrow here. So that'll be another way of kind of seeding these ideas throughout the church. Another thing that we tried that was very successful was to have a combined teen and parent class where we studied the book Sticky Faith, which I had that book up, a picture of it in an earlier session. That was a really transformative book for me. Like it really kind of changed my trajectory in youth ministry and set me on a course that ultimately has me standing before you today. It was a really influential book for me. And so we've done this a few times where we've had a class with teens and their parents, and each family has a book, and they're encouraged to like read the chapter before they come, and then we talk about it. Some nights they sit in tables, like we have teen tables and parents tables. Sometimes we have family tables where they're just sitting with each other, and they're talking to each other, they're learning from one another. And that's something that we've done several times, and the parents love it. The teens, they tolerate it, honestly. But by the end, they get used to it, really, they do. And one thing we did the last time we did it at Cloverdale, we extended the invitation not just to teens and their parents, but also to parents of younger kids too. Because passing faith on is not something that you wait to start until your kid turns 13. In fact, if you do that, yikes, because that it's harder then. And so we just wanted to have a lot of different people together studying that class material together. Because it's not only is the content good, but like we're actually modeling intergenerational and family connection even in the class itself, right? And then finally, even within our youth group, I have emphasized these principles to our students. One year, my previous church, we had a youth group theme which was church family, and in our Wednesday night Bible classes, we focused on how the church was like a family in which, in ways in which we could strengthen those ties. We just hit it week after week. In our youth ministry, we have these 6 different youth ministry goals that we're trying to accomplish. We have those posted in our our youth room. We're actually going through that in I mentioned like our cell groups. We're actually going through our goals right now on Wednesday nights, and that's what we're doing. One of those is connect. We want to connect our students to a variety of people throughout the church. So that's one of our youth ministry goals, and it's something we specifically teach on and tell students. So then when we try certain things, and they're like, why are we doing this? All I have to say is connect, and they know, right? Another one of our goals is stick, which I ripped off from Sticky Faith. Stick. We want our young people to develop a transformative faith that will stick with them for life. And so again, if we come home early from a retreat and they're like, why do we have to come back? So-and-so's youth group is staying. Stick. And if I do a good job, and I do this over time, like I just have to say one word, and they know why we're doing the things that we're doing. These ideas are important, so our students should understand them as well. And when you emphasize these things enough, they start to get it. I remember having one of my students tell me, and this was at my previous church, but she'd visited one night, like I think it was a Wednesday night with a friend, and had gone to a different church. And at that church, the youth group was separated into its own building, and the teens never saw the rest of the congregation. And I remember she was just talking about it, and she said, okay, what'd you think about that? And she said, that was really weird. I don't think that's the way it's supposed to be. And I was like, yes. She's getting it, She's starting to understand. I mentioned, a lot of times we do come home early, and our teens don't necessarily like that, but they get to where they don't complain about it anymore. It's just the way we do things, and they understand why we're doing it as well. So this process of establishing youth and family ministry as a core value takes time. I worked at it for years at Farmington, and I've been working at it ever since I've gotten to Cloverdale. The pandemic has not been super helpful, as you maybe can imagine, but that's okay. We're just going to work on it. It takes time to change culture, and it's not something that you try really hard for 6 months, and it's like, we're not where we are, so let's give up. No, you just have to stay the course and keep trying, keep working at it, and you see benefits over time. All right, so that's number one, establish youth ministry as a core value, youth and family ministry as a core value. Number two, take advantage of already existing programs. Generally speaking, people struggle with rapid and significant change. And even if you are bringing about positive changes for good reasons, it's possible to do that in unhealthy ways. And so the last thing that we want to do in trying to bring, your church's youth ministry into a, more in line with biblical principles, the last thing we want to do is to sabotage that effort by trying to accomplish too much change too quickly. So with this in mind, I think it's really important that you take a look at the things that you're already doing. And probably you're going to find a lot of stuff that you're like, we were doing pretty good on this. That's good. And so you don't want to get rid of that. You want to hold on to that and maybe tweak it slightly to make it even more in line with where you want it to go. But there's a lot to be said for looking at what you're already doing that's working well, and that's very much supporting intergenerational connection or supporting families discipling their own kids. And so you want to hold on to those things and encourage those, and maybe just tweak them slightly to make them more family-friendly and intergenerational in nature, instead of being like, all right, we're scrapping everything, turning the page, we're doing a whole bunch of brand new stuff. In fact, one author suggests that you not really add more than one new program a year, and even that you avoid using terminology like intergenerationality, which is hard to say and kind of a buzzword. Don't say that, just do it. You don't have to be like, all right, we're going to be intergenerational and you're going to like it, or, hit the road, Jack, or whatever. Don't do that. That's a really bad idea. Instead, just be like, hey, at our fall fellowship this year, I just looked up and saw that. At our fall fellowship this year, we're going to do this, and maybe it's just a slight tweak, slightly different thing than something that happened before, where you're still embracing good things that you've done, but you're just kind of bringing them a little bit more in line with these values. And in my experience, when I examined a lot of stuff that we were doing, I found, hey, a lot of this stuff's really good. We can just make a ever so slight change, and it'll be even better to what we want to do. And so when we do this, we can emphasize the values that we see in Scripture without jarring people with too much change or suggesting that the hard work of people has been bad or just a total waste. And that's never true. We can always find good things to affirm and to keep going with. Step 3, we want to provide a variety of youth and family activities. So if youth and family ministry is to truly be a core value of the church, then a family focus, and by that I mean both physical family and faith family, a family focus needs to be present in all areas of church life. And so following, I'm going to suggest some different ideas in the areas of worship, service and outreach, education, mentoring, and fellowship. And I'll have those words up on the screen in a moment. Since my goal in this session is to focus on practical implementation, I'm just going to share some ideas with you in these different categories of things that we've done at Farmington and Cloverdale. And some ideas of things that I want to try. And again, I just want to emphasize, I never got our youth ministry at Farmington to like a finished product state. Like this is the one, we should fly people in from all over the world to see this youth ministry because it's that good. I never got it to that place. Certainly we're not there at Cloverdale because just starting on this. But it's like, this is kind of one of those journey, not destination things, right? Like we're never going to have it perfect. We're just always trying to improve and make it more in line with what Scripture teaches. So I'm going to give ideas. Some of them are, maybe they work really well here. Some of them, maybe they won't. Some of them, frankly, maybe didn't work very well when I tried them. And I'll try to be honest about that if I see it. But just trying, like a lot of this is just based on how creative can we be? How can we use our imaginations to come up with things that work? And I'll just give you some different ideas in different categories. So worship is one of the most significant areas for youth and family ministry, for intergenerational connection. Here are some things that we've done, whether at Farmington or Cloverdale, to try to help our young people grow spiritually through contact with their physical and faith families in worship. So, as you can probably imagine, all of our families and generations worship together, as there is no separate service for children. Young people see their parents and other adult Christians worship and learn that this is a valued part of Christian life. And as I've already mentioned, as a youth minister, I really make an effort to have our youth group present as often as possible. Having said that, by not having children's church, all that you do is you guarantee multi-generational worship. You think back to multi-generational versus intergenerational, if you remember that. Multi-generational is good, but that's not the goal. Intergenerational is the goal. And so I would just indicate, like, I've known of several churches, and my previous congregation was one of these, where it's like we were actually really prideful about not having children's church. Like, well, some churches do this, but we don't do that. But we didn't do a good job of being intergenerational. We just had them all there, but it's not like we were doing a great job of engaging our kids. So we are multi-generational in worship, and we're trying to work towards being intergenerational, but just having them present isn't great if they're totally like checked out and never engaged or anything like that. All right, at Farmington, something that we did monthly, we had a youth-led worship where our young men and teens were regularly involved in leading worship. And this was like really like young boys up through high school, and they would lead songs and prayers and read scripture and serve the Lord's Supper and even give like short sermons and things. So it was like a good training aspect, and that was very intergenerational. Considering that both parents and children worship together, hear the same sermon each week, one thing that we implemented in the bulletin, we had what we called table talk questions. So like whoever was preaching that day, we'd have like a couple of discussion questions. And the idea was you can talk about these around the table when you're having dinner together that day, and you can kind of like engage with your kids about what was presented in the sermon. I never got the impression that worked great because I just didn't think a lot of our parents did it. But I thought it was a good idea. I still think it's a good idea if you could just kind of take that next step. Trying to provide something where you are giving families the opportunity to discuss what happened later. The songs that we sing in worship are a balanced mixture of kind of traditional favorites and also contemporary songs. So we're trying to provide a variety of songs for a variety of people of different ages. I heard someone say, when it comes to church music, you know you're doing it right if everyone's a little bit unhappy. If someone's getting exactly what they want, that kind of guarantees that someone else is really not getting what they want. And so I think it's probably good for us to we're a body, we're a family, we're all in this together, and we have different likes and preferences, and so we should be willing to put up with some different things. And by the way, sometimes it's helpful maybe to have, I'm trying to think of who suggested this to me, but it was another minister. But like sometimes when they would do singing nights or something like that, they would say, this is Sister So-and-so's favorite song, before they would sing it. And so it's kind of helpful to think like, if you're like a younger person, you're like, this song is from 1712. Like I don't love this song. But if I know that it's Sister So-and-so's favorite song, and I know Sister So-and-so, and I care about her, now I'm much more interested in singing that song. And the same thing, like some brand new song where it's like, oh, what is this song? Like the chorus repeats 24 times. This drives me crazy. But if you know, like, oh, but it's my grandson's favorite song? Oh, okay, I can learn this song. So really we can do this through the way that we sing. And then also, I can't pretend that this is a regular practice, but I loved it, and I wish that it were a regular practice. A few months ago, one of our elders, when he was leading singing, he invited little children to come up like in front of the stage and kind of sit down, and like if they're really little, like their parents help them come up. And we sang Jesus Loves Little Children, like just one random song, but for those kids, like they were super involved in that. And it was something that, especially like as a regular practice, I think would work. Something that they would look forward to and be engaged in. So that's worship. I'll just acknowledge worship is tough because worship is really important, and we value that, and we want to make sure that we worship in ways that are appropriate. Sometimes because of that, I think we're not open in ways that we should be, that are okay to be more involved and engaging of different generations. Next, service and outreach. This is another area where parents and other mature Christians can model for their children what the Christian life looks like. We had some things going on that we could tweak just slightly to accomplish this. At Farmington, each spring our congregation had like a day of service where we would just kind of go out through our community and try to engage in different service projects. And, like mow lawns, wash cars, fix up flower beds at schools, things like that. And this was an already existing event, but to just kind of give it a more youth and family focus, we just changed the ways that we split up our work crews. So previously, like we would have adults that would go out, and like our teens stayed behind at the church building and did like a car wash that the youth minister was in charge of. So that was that was terrible for other reasons. So it was also a little self-serving to be like, I don't want to wash cars with these teens all day. But we just split up our work crews. And so it's like we would send teens out, sometimes like, a father and son would go out to mow lawns together, or, with just some other pairing that would go out. So we just redistributed the way that we made our groups. So we still accomplished the same goals, but now they were working intergenerationally. We had a group of older women who got together and made quilts for like the children's hospital, for kids who were at the children's hospital and others who needed them. Something that developed over time that I had nothing to do with was some of our younger girls started going to be a part of that group with our older ladies who were quilting, and they learned how to quilt. Like they learned an actual skill. They served, and they did it intergenerationally alongside these other women. At Cloverdale, we have a ministry, or pre-COVID we did. It's one of those that is not back yet. But we had a ministry called Monday Night for the Master, which is basically like a lot of people get together and we share a meal and then we serve different ways. And a lot of that was intergenerational. So it's like one thing that would always happen, there'd be like a card writing group. So like if you were sick and had been gone, or if you visited or whatever. And so we had usually people that actually knew how to write would write the card, but like the little kids would like, sign their names and misspell their names. Little kids, really little up until like grade school kids, and they're like also being a part of this, and that's just one example. But we were kind of intergenerational in our service opportunities. Another example of tweaking an already existing events, for years before Christmas, a lot of adults in our congregation would adopt less fortunate children from like a local school district and like buy Christmas presents for them to make sure that they would have a good Christmas. Our youth group actually did the same thing. Well, rather than have two separate parallel activities, we ended up combining the events. And so this is, now, and they still do it, even though, I'm not there anymore, but it's now a big church event each year at Farmington, they call it the Elf Party, because we're like Santa's helpers. And so everyone meets together at the church building. They load up the church bus. They go to Walmart. We live in Arkansas. Walmart's everywhere, right? And so we go to Walmart and like buy these presents and then come back and like wrap presents together and share a meal. And it's like this wonderful thing. And when they go and shop, like the students will randomly go with other adults and go throughout the store. Because like a lot of adults are like, I have no idea what a 13-year-old wants. Hey, you, come here. And so, they'll go around and kind of shop together. And this is just a wonderful activity. It's one of the best things that we did. And we're now kind of slowly trying to implement that at Cloverdale as well. So those are just some service outreach ideas. There's a lot of other things that could be said. A third category is education, which provides a tremendous opportunity for interaction between young people and adults and for equipping families to be the primary disciple makers of their kids. At Farmington, we had a big vacation Bible school each summer, and our teams were really involved in that. And this, they did a lot of work to help set up and decorate. It was a huge production at my last church. They would also teach the classes, and they would do a lot of things. And this emphasizes, again, that intergenerationality happens in both directions, because young people, like teenagers, can teach those who are younger than them. They might not be fully equipped to teach everything that they would need to, but like they can teach 4-year-olds certain things. And so that's really important. It helps to solidify relationships within the church. We've also had at different times, like junior high and high school girls kind of rotate into children's classes for a few weeks. Because, we do want them to get their own teaching in classes, but it's still good for them to have the practice of doing it. At Cloverdale, we just started a new elementary education program I'll say more about in a moment. But that's structured in such a way where there's kind of these short units, and so students could more easily rotate in there. And we're actually, Caroline works, she's the children's education coordinator, facilitator. I can never get it. It's a really complicated title. But she does a lot of that stuff, and so we're actually working to figure out like a unit where our teens can go in and kind of like take over the whole place and teach for like 3 weeks. So that actually kind of terrifies me, but it's really good. So, and if it's bad, it's for 3 weeks. It'll be okay. I mentioned earlier combined parent-teen class based off of the book Sticky Faith. I've done this now like 3 times, and I always get such good feedback from parents. Like they really, really appreciate it because they actually get to hear their kids say things. Because a lot of times these conversations that need to be happening at home are not. And so part of what we're trying to do is we're just modeling how to have spiritual conversations with your kids. And so getting to hear their kids talk about these things has been really helpful. And it's now a permanent part of our curriculum rotation. So like every 3 years, we'll have a Sticky Faith class. Another idea, this is something I haven't actually tried yet, but I have taught before on like teen relationships and dating and stuff like that. But as a part of that, like bring in a couple from your church who have been married for 50 years and maybe get some ideas and principles from them on like, how have you stayed together so long? Like, how do we glorify God in our relationships and things like this? Going back to that idea of teaching to value older adults, like here are some people who've successfully done what you're totally struggling with right now as a 16-year-old. What's some wisdom that we could learn from them? And then also special seminars for parents on marriage or parenting or personal finance, technology, social media usage, anything like that. That helps parents to better model the Christian lifestyle for their children is an important part of youth and family ministry. Number 4, mentoring is a really important component of youth and family ministry, specifically pairing older Christians with younger ones as a means of developing close relationships and illustrating what mature faith looks like. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. By the way, it doesn't even have to be a church-led thing. Like parents could just go recruit, like, hey, I would like for you to be a mentor to my kid, and then kind of figure out what that looks like. But actually, that's weird in our society because we have a society that is so age segregated. These are things that happen naturally a long time ago. And so since that's just not our environment now, we have to kind of intentionally make some of these things happen and encourage them to happen. I mentioned earlier, one of the big ways that we do this is through our cell groups on Wednesday nights. where we're trying to make sure that all of our students have 2 or 3 adult mentors just from that one program, just from cell groups. But you think about the cumulative effect of this. If we have students who are faithfully attending our cell groups, I mean, that's like 40 meetings a year where they're having spiritual conversations with these adult mentors. They're praying together. They're talking about their lives. And then hopefully they're also connecting with them many times outside of those times. And so cumulatively over time, these become really meaningful relationships. Okay, so I mentioned our new elementary education program. It's called Graceland. And basically our students rotate through 6 different rooms as part of a unit. So 3 on Sunday morning, 3 on Sunday night, so 6 sessions. Wednesday night, sorry. 3 on Sunday morning, 3 on Wednesday night, so 6 sessions, 3 weeks. And each room is different. So there's like a museum room, and where they go into the museum, they learn about like history and archaeology and geography to reinforce a Bible lesson. Or they might go to like a theater room where they're kind of like acting out the story. So they're reinforcing these biblical themes and lessons over and over again. But since they rotate a lot, they see a lot of different teachers. And so in order to give them some consistency, they have another person who's not their teacher, guides, who stay with them time after time. And so they're with them consistently to give them structure. But also, these guys are not just like line leaders that take them to different rooms. They're also kind of like mentors. So they'll pray with those kids, and they will talk to them about what's going on in their lives. And ideally, they could also show up and support them in ways outside of that time. They're basically cell group leaders for younger kids as well. Which, I mean, you start thinking about that over time when we get this going the way we want, like from kindergarten, first grade, I don't know all the details, from first grade through 12th grade, it's just this continual thing where starting in first grade, there have been adult Christians who have been praying with them on a regular basis, but very directly praying with them and getting to know them. And that's just been a part of their experience for the 12 years they've been in grade school. And it's not like any one of those prayers or any one of those days makes a difference, but we talked earlier about all these practices and the cumulative effect of those practices. What about this? What about the cumulative effect of 12 years of regularly meeting with adult Christians and praying with them? Over time, what could we accomplish? What could we build through that? When we have our yearly youth group retreat, the retreat is formatted based on our cell group. So we'll have like a speaker come in, hey, can you give me some discussion questions on what you're going to do? And then we break into our cell groups, and our cell group leaders come to the retreat. And so those same people, because by the way, after a while, like they know their cell group leaders better than they know me, right? Because I've given up a lot of my time with them for these cell group leaders, and so they're more excited to talk to their cell group leaders about stuff than just the youth minister. And so, and by the way, the cell group leaders are part of the church. Like I may come and go as a minister, but we're trying to change culture long term. One project we tried in the past was giving our youth group students assignments where we would print off, we had a church picture directory for the church. And so it's like I would give students a name and a picture, and they would have to go find that person and interview them. Like I gave them a few sample questions, and they'd have to come back and present to class okay, this is Scott Laird. Scott's been a Christian for this many years, and he really likes this about our church, or whatever. And so it's just a way, and I let the adults know ahead of time, hey, you might have some students randomly coming up and talking to you. This is why they're doing that. It'd be really nice if you were polite to them, but I gave them homework, and they would come, and some did more than others. I also think I bribed them, if you do this, you'll get candy or something like that. All right, so that's some different mentoring ideas. And then finally, youth and family can easily be structured within the context of fellowship activities. I don't know what things are like up here. Down in the South, potluck meals are a big deal. Fellowship meals, or at least, again, pre-COVID, we haven't done as much of that lately. But my previous congregation, we had a significant number of congregation-wide fellowship meals, and these just provide an excellent opportunities for interaction between all age groups, especially if you force it. If you don't force it, we will do what is natural to us, which is kid table, adult table. Like it's been modeled for us at Thanksgiving forever. So it's like, we'll just do that. But with a little bit of effort, and sometimes that means like you just have to be like the intergenerational evangelist, spreading the good news of different generations. And so like there's a teen table and you just go sit at it. And they're like, you're like, well, you know. But again, like if you have these ideas, like if it were me, I'd sit down and I'd be like, connect. And then be like, oh, okay, all right, we'll talk, yeah. But yeah, I mean, so these are, again, multi-generational things provide the opportunity for intergenerational engagement. So it's a healthy first step. At Farmington each year we had a family retreat. By family I meant our entire church family. So like events like this where you can just kind of get away for a day or two and spend time together playing, studying, just hanging out as a church family are really helpful. At Cloverdale we have family encampment at the end of summer. So a bunch of families of all ages go out for a weekend and camp. Some of them actually camp in tents. Others have like super nice campers and RVs and don't really experience any of the harsh realities of Cersei in the summer. But they're all out there together, and it culminates with a worship service on Sunday. It's really intergenerational. We've had church-wide fall festivals and trunk or treats with carnival games and activities for families that we do in the fall. This year, we're trying to get, so it's like, we kind of discourage 18-year-olds from dressing up and like trying to take all the candy. But what they could do is like help decorate a trunk or something like that, or run a game, or do whatever. It's a way to serve those kids who are younger, and we're trying to encourage them to do that, like with their families or with their cell groups or whatever. Couple ideas that we haven't actually tried, but I think would be neat. One idea illustrates the principle that older Christians can learn from those who are younger, would be to have like a technology tutorial. At a certain age, it gets kind of hard for us to appropriate new technology. I don't know what that age is, but I'm like already close. Like certain things, I'm like, it starts to stress me out a little bit. But like you have all these teens who are just, they're digital natives. Like they've grown up and they just know how to do all this stuff. And so, you know, have a teen help an older adult set up a social media account so they can keep tabs on their grandkids or interact with them, or like, I've got this new phone and I have no idea how to work it. Can you show me how? I mean, like there's ways to do some of those things that can be really helpful. Also things like multi-generational game nights, where people of all ages come together to play board games or card games or something like that. And you could even teach each other different games. I played this one 40 years ago, or like, I bought this game just last week because it's brand new. But we could play and enjoy. The key idea in all of this is that there are a lot of different types of activities that we participate in as the church and as the body of believers, and we should try to incorporate youth and family principles across all of the things that we do. I've got to go really fast. I just saw what time it is. So step 4, we want to balance youth and family activities with age-specific ministry. Hopefully you can tell by now how important I think the youth and family approach is, how it reflects what the Bible says. Research indicates it's true. So we want to emphasize the faith family and the physical family, but that doesn't mean that we're scrapping any sort of age-specific ministry. And this is an important idea because I focus so much on the other stuff that people can sometimes think that I'm saying something that I'm not. I'm not saying that you should never have your teens hang out with each other. I'm not saying that. Like we still have a youth group. We have a youth minister. It's me. We have a calendar of youth events. We do stuff. That's important because natural differences exist between generational groups, and this should not be ignored. Students at 16 are going through some things that students at 12 are not. They're certainly going through things that maybe those of you who are 50 or 60 went through in different ways, but they're also going through in a different context. And so there's real value in being around their peers. But age-specific activities and ministries need to be complemented by all of the other stuff that we've been talking about. So it's not an either-or approach, it's both and. There is value in age-specific ministry. Youth and family ministry recognizes that. But the days of systematic age segregation are behind us. We're not interested in doing that anymore. And then finally, step 5, evaluate and make mid-course corrections. This is the final step. It may be somewhat obvious, but I just want to state it just in case. as you work to implement youth and family ministry in your congregation, you will try things that do not work. And I could probably give you some ideas of things that I thought were great, and it was total train wreck. And that's okay. You're trying. And when you try stuff, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. The important thing is, if something doesn't work, don't give up. Try something else. Like, the ideas are biblical. We've kind of established that. So, like, the goal is biblical. How we go about doing that, that's kind of up to us. And so we try it different ways, and if it doesn't work out, we try other ways. We're not trying to follow a rigid model. What we are trying to do is be faithful to what Scripture teaches us about how to raise our kids to a mature faith. I'm just going to throw this up really quickly. These are some helpful resources. We got one more session, but we're going to kind of turn a little bit in the afternoon to a different tack. So if you're interested in reading more, this is a slide you might want to take a picture of. I've already talked about number 4, Sticky Faith. That was a really good book for me. Number 5, Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family. So Sticky Faith is about 2/3 research and then about 1/3 practical application. The Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family is the opposite of that. It's about 1/3 research and 2/3 practical. So it kind of depends, like, are you a theory person or a practical person? I've now transitioned to where I use the bottom book, Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family, when I'm teaching that to at church with families. Because a lot of families are like, yeah, the research is great, just tell me what to do. And that's okay. And so we use that one. Almost Christian, we're going to talk about that book more in the last session, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's really helpful as far as like what teenagers believe according to research. Family-based youth ministry, that book's a little bit older now, but it really emphasizes some of these ideas that we've been talking about, one of the first books to do so. And then sustainable youth ministry is really helpful as far as like kind of creating a culture that can last instead of something that's so based on the personality of the youth minister. A lot of youth ministries, like maybe they're working well until a youth minister leaves, and then it was all built on that person, and so it falls apart. So how can we do things in more sustainable and healthy ways? Which, by the way, spoiler alert, involves getting more people involved, more people in the church who can be mentors. All right, we're just a little bit late, 12:04, but we're going to break for lunch, and then we'll come back for one more session. I really appreciate you guys being here today and your attention and your questions. Again, write down questions if you have them, and we'll make sure we get to them at some point.